When you think of Shakespeare, you probably think of Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Othello, or one of his many other plays. At least that's what I thought of until I began to read the sonnets. I was surprised when I found the first 17 were commonly called the procreation sonnets. They are essentially rhetoric trying to convince a young man to marry and have children. This came as a complete surprise to me. So I'd like to go over today talking about what Shakespeare had to say about marriage. We'll go over it line by line, but I'd like to start by reading the whole thing. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die, but as the riper should by time decease, his tender heir might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud buriest thy content, and tender churl makest waste and niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due by the grave and thee. From fairest creatures we desire increase. What does that mean? Well, fair meaning beauty, and creatures are a reference to people, and we desire more of them. So when we see beautiful things, we want there to be more. That thereby, or so that, beauty's rose may never die, so that beauty will always remain in the world. We want more beautiful things, so that beauty always stays in the world. But as the riper, as in a riper banana, a fruit that is ripe is younger. Younger, youthful beauty should, with time, decease. His tender heir might bear his memory. A reference to having children who keep the memory of their parents alive by having the same genetics and facial structures as them, especially in a time before phones or cameras where you can't just have pictures and memories of your youth. The only memory that would remain of a youth in that day would be when that youth has grown and had children that bear the image of their parents. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes. Contracted here is a play on a marriage contract. So he's saying, but you are in love with your own nice eyes. Feedest thy flame with self-substantial fuel. So the idea is, your eye is useless on its own. It needs a light outside of itself. And normally our eyes are filled with joy from seeing light outside of us, but you are so self-absorbed, this young man, that the light that he is seeing is that which is in himself, not outside of himself. And that light is a fire that is burning up himself, self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance used to lie. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, or prized possession, and only herald to the gaudy spring. Within thine own bud buriest thy content. So here he's referencing the beautiful rose at the beginning and how we want beauty's rose to never die, but you have buried all your content within your own bud. And tender churl. Churl is a reference to a lowly person, and niggarding means stinginess. So you are this lowly peasant who is wasting all of his resources and stinginess. Pity the world, as in have pity on the world, because you are not giving it what it is due. In Shakespeare's eyes, you owe the world life and children because it gave you life. And now, by being so self-absorbed and being this glutton, eating what is due to the world, it's not only the grave that is taking life and beauty, it is also thee. C.S. Lewis had this idea that attraction is a healthy appetite that draws the individual out of themselves. It eventually leads to marriage, which forces you to get down to the real business of learning to get along with another person for the rest of your life. It corrects your personality. Flaws that you wouldn't realize on your own are now being pointed out to you. Attraction thus forces you into a maturing process when it is fulfilled in another person. Hopefully, this will lead to children. Having a child is often someone's first experience of truly loving something more than you love yourself, a level of maturity that is scarcely reached without having children. The problem that most people face is that this healthy appetite meant to lead to maturity is turned inwardly. They get an AI girlfriend that they never have to argue with, or read some romance novel to satisfy their appetite. These imaginary romances are cheap, easy, and never ask you to mature. Lewis says, in the end, they become merely the medium through which they increasingly adore themselves. After all, almost the main work of life is to come out of yourself, out of that little dark prison we are all born in. Our culture is filled with the memo that getting deeper into that dark prison is freedom. Fulfill your desire in whatever way makes you happy. It begins to bleed into your relationships. Everyone just becomes a tool to make you happy. And when they fail to adore you in the same way that your imaginary romances do, you write them off. You slowly destroy the only relationships that you do have and end up in an isolated prison. Everything that you value will be lost. You will have no inheritance. Your health and beauty will fade. The only thing left to comfort you will be those shadowy figures in the cell with you, who you find less pleasant after every interaction. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due by the grave and thee.